Back. Just remember yesterday we were looking at our different data types. We were looking at casting variables into different data types, from string to float, from float to string, etc., etc. Today we are going to be looking at, well, my PowerPoint's frozen a little bit there. Today we're going to be looking at built-in functions in Python. Now, built-in functions, they are functions that actually come with Python, and it actually makes your life a little bit easier. And let's go through this. And as we're going through it, I'm going to actually try it out in Python so that you can see how it works. And if we have time, we are going to be looking at how we're going to apply it in a real world application. Right. Firstly, in Python, you have built-in functions. These functions are also called methods, people. And the first type of function that you actually have, which actually makes it very, very easy, makes your life very easy, it's called a max function. And you'll notice over here, I've got max, and inside I've got n1, n2, n3. These are numbers, people. And you can actually have up until 256. And what this function actually does, or what this method actually does, is from that list that you actually send to it, it would determine the largest value and it will send it back. So if you look at this example over here, I've got a variable large is assigned max 45, 6, 98, 2, and 55. And if I say print large, it's going to output 98, 98 being the largest value in that list. So if we come here and if we look at this, I'm going to just say large is assigned max, and I'm just going to go and put in some values over here, 67, 2, 99. And if I say print large and run it, from that list over there, the largest value is 99. So it should actually display 99 for us. Okay. Okay. One thing that I actually forgot to actually tell you was that at the top over here, we're actually going to be something called import math. Let's try that now. There we go. Right? 99. Now, this import math, basically, what does import math basically means is this. So math is a module. It's a module that exists in Python. And inside math, there are many, many functions. And we're actually going to be working through the most common functions that you're going to need this year. Right, if we look at the first function we looked at now, the first method we looked at was max. The second one is min. Obviously, it's the opposite of max, min, and you give it a whole bunch of numbers and it will determine the smallest value and it will return it. If you look at this example of yes, smallest is assigned min 45, 6, 98, 2, and 55, print smallest. So what the min method is going to do is it's going to find the lowest value there, take it and store it in smallest. And we're going to display that. So if I come here and if I say small is assigned min, and if I had 88, 6, 77, and if we said print small and run that, so now this is going to be displaying the largest and the smallest from the two different lists. So it should give us 99 and 6 here. Okay. Doesn't seem to. There we go, 99 and 6. Can you see that? Now, moving on, we have, well, generally this is normally done in grade 9. It's called your absolute value function. the ABS function, the absolute value. What your absolute value function actually does is that if it has a negative number, it makes it a positive. So if you look at this over here, num is assigned ABS, absolute value of negative 76. It's going to actually just pull out the 76 and make it positive. So basically, mathematically speaking, what we could say is happening over here is this. That Python is ABS is going to check, is this a negative number? If it is a negative number, it will multiply it by -1. If you multiply it by -1, remember it's going to become positive, and it will take that positive answer and store it in num. If it is a positive number, it will leave it as is. So if you look at this over here, the ABS of negative 76, it's storing it in num. We're coming and printing num over here, and you'll notice that it is positive 76. So if I come here, sorry, the wrong place. If I come over here and say num is assigned ABS of negative, say, 87, and print num, and now it's going to give us three things. Remember that the 99 from there, the 6 from the small. Oh, sorry, this is a different programming language syntax altogether. Okay. There we go. 99 was the largest, 6 was the smallest, and negative 87 became positive 87. So if you look at this over here, your absolute value, your ABS method, made it a positive number. Right. Sorry. Then obviously we've actually looked at an example like this over here where we're actually finding the power. Remember the double asterisk? Remember that if we go and say, I'm just going to remove all of this for now, because, right? And if I come over here and say n is assigned 3 to the power 5, and if I say print n, it should give me, I think, 243. I am making this mistake. Sorry about that, guys. That's a different program. There we go, 243. 3 now. We can do the same thing. Look at this over here. We've got 3 to the power 5. We can do the same thing by saying power of 3, comma 5. And let's run that. And it still gives us 243. So if you look at this over here, the power function actually does the same thing as the double asterisk. Now we come to the round. Now remember, in programming, we're going to be needing to round off numbers according to specific number of decimal places, etc. There's two ways of actually using round, people. The first way is if you look at this over here, one thing I forgot to tell you, these things inside the bracket for all of these methods, these things inside the brackets, like for example, num over here and num comma p over here, they are called arguments. They are called arguments. So whenever we are calling a method and we have anything inside the brackets, they are called arguments. So for example, if you look at this print n over here, n is an argument. If you look at power 3, 5, 3 and 5 are arguments. So if you look at it the first way, right? If we specify, look at this example over here. Answer is assigned round 23, 2453, 2. See this comma 2 here, guys? This comma 2 actually tells Python how many decimal places. So that's what the P is. The comma P, it represents the number of decimal places. So we're going to be rounding off 23.2453 to 2 decimal places. And if we round it off to 2 decimal places, the second decimal place is 4, and that's a 5. So the 4 will become 5, and we get 23.5. Now, we can choose not to decide how many decimal places. If we leave it out, if we leave the number of decimal places argument out completely, what Python does is it'll round the number up to the nearest whole number. So if you look at this example here, we've got answer is assigned round 23.2453. 0.53, and there's no number of decimal places specified. So what Python does is it rounds it off to the nearest whole number. So if you look at after the decimal place, that's a 2, so 23, and that will remain as 23. So if we come and look at this over here, and if I said n is assigned round 31.245, comma 2, I'm rounding off 31.245. Oh, and let's just make this a 6 over here. See why just now. So what am I doing over here? I'm rounding off 31.645 to 2 decimal places. And I'm going to come over here and print n, and let's run that. Look at it, 0.64. Now, why 64? Well, it actually should have been 65. Right. Let's try that again. Oh, sorry. There we go, 65. Now, same example. I'm going to leave the number of decimal places out completely. And this, look at after the point, we have a 6. So the 31 should become 32. And it rounds it off to the next whole number. Right. So remember, with the round, we can either have one argument or we can have two. If we have one argument, it rounds it off to the nearest integer. If we have two arguments, the P represents the number of decimal places. Now, there are other built-in functions or methods, right? And this is where we come to the import, right? Now, normally our import statements, what actually import means is this. You see, in your, let's go back here. You see, in your math module, there are lots and lots and lots of methods. These methods exist in that math module. Excuse me, they don't exist in this module here that I'm working with right now. If I need access to those methods in math, I have to use the import statement. So import is a reserved word. So basically what we're telling Python is, yeah, whatever methods are in that math module, we want access to it. So please allow us access to it. So you'll notice now the next few functions we're actually going to be doing, what it actually does is it uses those methods that belong to the math module. Now, because it belongs to the math module, we actually call using the name of the math module, right? So let's look at the first one. The first one we have, now notice how what this method, excuse me, the name of the method of the module dot your seal dot your method. That's actually your method. Seal is your method. We have one argument in here. One argument, generally it's a float number. Now what this function does is, remember with round, it will make 31 32 if this number over here is 5 or more. With sealing, sealing, now remember sealing is on top. So irrespective of what decimal place that, what decimal value that is, it could be a 1. Now remember, if I round off 31, listen, check this out. If I round off 31.1, it's going to make it 31. Right. Because this 0.1 is less, it's going to make it 31. Right? But in the same token now, check this out. If I go over here and say math.seal, that means I'm saying the ceiling. Now, when do we use examples like this over here? For example, if you determine, you know what, we need to work out how many people we need to complete a particular task. And when you use a mathematical formula, you come up with, hey, we're going to need 31.1 people. You cannot get 0.1 of a person. You cannot get 0.1 of a person. Therefore, you use seal to get it to the next number. So obviously, we're going to need 32 people. So when we look at values like that over there in the real world, where we can't get a fraction of it or a decimal part of it, right? For example, if we are transporting pupils from point A to point B for an excursion, and we need to work out, okay, there are 30 pupils per bus. We need to work out how many buses. There are 243 children. It will be 243 divided by 30. Now, if we look at this over here, and if I say print well, basically 243 divided by 30, I am not going to get a whole number answer. I'm actually going to get 8 point something. Now, you do not get 8 point something buses. So it'll become 9 buses, right? Just going to take that out for now and run this to show you how seal works. So remember, seal should move 31 to 32. There we go. So seal will move 31 to 32, right? Irrespective of what this is. Even if it was an 8, obviously it will also make it 32. Irrespective of what the decimal value is, it will always move it to the next whole number, to the next integer value. Okay, which brings us to the next one. Now, obviously, if we have a seal, which is moving it upwards to the nearest whole number, we get a floor. I know it's not very original, ceiling and floor. We get a floor. So irrespective of what your decimal value is over there, irrespective of what your decimal value is, it's going to move it down. Now look at this here. Answer is assigned math.floor, and I've got 23.2. Irrespective of what this point value is, the decimal value is, it's going to move it down to 23. If you look at this here, answer is assigned math.floor of 23.5. Now remember, 23.5, if we round it off, it's going to become 24. But if you look at this over here, it's bringing it back down to 23. So let's go and say floor, and I've got 31.8 over there, right? Remember, floor is going to bring it down. So irrespective of the 0.8 being a larger value and all of that there, it's going to bring it down to 31. Can you see that? So far in the math module, right, we looked at seal and we looked at floor, right? Now, just remember that when you need to use any of these things, you actually need to have an import math statement right at the top. This is an interesting one. Trunk. Trunk, people, is short for the word truncate. Trunk is short for the word truncate. Truncate means to cut off. So truncate works like this here. Irrespective of what the decimal part is, it'll just drop it, chop it off, and just give you the whole number part. Now, if you look at this number here, 31.7, we've got a whole number part, which is 31, and we've got a decimal part, which is 0.7. What trunk does, it actually just does the opposite of round. Rounds off, remember that? It takes the decimal value into account. Truncate just cuts it off. So 31.7, print answer, and it'll give you 31. So basically what it actually does is, and let's do it here. Right? Look at trunk. Right? Now remember, I've got 31.8. Our answer should be 31 because it should just chop off the 0.8. Check it out, guys. So we had 31.8, truncate, trunk, chopped off the 0.8, and just gave us back the whole number. So it is important to understand. Remember, when you get a programming question, they're not going to tell you have to use this, you have to use that. Like the example I was talking about, the number of people to do a task, or the number of buses you need, or we're talking about those buses, right? We're talking about those buses. If I said print, I said was 243 divided by 30, right? We're talking about seal over here, right? Look at it, you're going to get 8.1. You cannot get 8.1 buses, so it will be obviously 9 buses. So you move it up. Right. And this is the last function we're going to be dealing with, and then we're going to be actually looking at something very, very interesting. Believe me. Right. Uh, your square root. Sometimes we need to find the square root. For example, what if they asked you to use Pythagoras? I mean, all of us should know Pythagoras by now, grade 8. For Pythagoras to find the hypotenuse or any side, we need to be able to find the square root, right? So this function actually determines the square root of a number and it returns a float value. Just remember that. It returns a float value. So if you look at this over here, right? Answer is assigned math dot square root 1225, print answer, and the square root of 21225 is 35, but it's a float number, so it'll be 35.0. Then we got what's this? Math dot square root 30. Let's go and try that out. So I'm gonna come here. Answer is assigned math dot square root, I'll just say 31, and print answer. So we're finding math dot square root is going to find, now basically, please let me explain this to you. SQRT is a method. Once again, SQRT is a method that belongs to the math module, right? SQRT is a method that belongs to the math module. 31, remember, it's inside the bracket, so it's called an argument. In this here, answer is an argument. So what's basically happening is this, guys. We're sending 31 to SQRT in the math module. So the math module exists somewhere else. SQRT is there. We are sending 31 to SQRT. SQRT will find the square root and it will send an answer back. And that answer will come here and then get stored in answer. Right? You need to understand how that works. Just remember the terminology that we use, methods, modules. There we go. The square root of 31. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is this over here, before I even go and look at the next part, is this, right? If we just going to go through this very quickly again, right? Just remember, you have built-in functions. Max finds the maximum of the number of lists, numbers that we send. Min finds the minimum. ABS, absolute, it actually makes any number a positive number, whether it's negative or positive, it'll make it a positive number. Pow, it raises a to the power b. It raises a to the power b. Round, we can either have round a single value and it'll round it off to the nearest whole number, or we can specify the number of decimal places. If you look at those two examples, and we said there are the built-in math functions, right? We've got ceil, so irrespective of what your decimal value is, 2 or 5 or 9 or 8, it will move that the whole number part to the next whole number. So 23 will become 24. Floor works the opposite of ceil, right? Irrespective of the decimal value, the decimal points that we have over there, it will bring it down. Trunk basically cuts off the decimal part of your answer, of your argument, right? And it returns just back just the whole number part. So what's basically happening here is, remember, trunk is a method that exists in the math module. We are sending 31.7 to trunk. Trunk will remove the decimal point and send back just the whole number part. This whole thing here, this entire thing here represents the whole number part, the answer, and that answer will come and get stored in the variable answer. Okay, and obviously square root, we send one our argument to SQRT. SQRT will find the square root, send it back, and it will come into answer. Remember, it goes from right to left, goes backwards. Now, just need to open something here. Why is this taking so slow? Give me a moment, guys. And this is what we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be modifying whatever we're going to be working with right now. But remember, we want to actually take all of the stuff that we're doing and associate it with work that you're doing in your other subjects, etc. So generally it's with mathematics and things like that there, but it could be with regards to science, with regards to formulae, etc. And we would work with that. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is some questions. And the first question we're going to be looking at is, right, these are beginner questions. So look at number one now. And this is important, guys. So you need to have pen and paper, make notes with regards to this, because you're not going to be able to remember everything at one, right? What you should do is a little bit later, I will actually uh, reduce the screen, take a screenshot of it or take a picture of it or whatever it is, and you can try it out on your own and check if it works. And by the way, before the end of the session, I will give you my email address. So if you have any queries, any questions, you can email me and we could work from there. Right, so let's look at the first question. Given the side of a square, now I'm saying given, right? Generally, we would say read in the side of a square, read in or input the side of the square, or allow the user to enter the side of the square, or get the side of the square from user input, or capture the side of the square from the keyboard. There's so many different ways of saying the same thing that, you know what, let the user, the person running the program, let them enter the side. But for in this instance over here, we're going to work from this and I'm going to show you how we're going to build on it. So the first thing is, I'm saying, given the side of the square, determine an output. Firstly, the perimeter. Now I'm saying this is important, guys. Determine an output, right? Determine means calculate. Output, display. Determine, calculate, output, display. So generally you will find it will say determine an output or give feedback to the user. Give feedback to the user means output, right? So we need, what do we need? We need the side of the square. We need one value, because obviously a square, in a square, what are the properties of a square? With regards to the sides, all sides are equal. Now, the perimeter of the square, the perimeter of a square. Now, what is perimeter? Perimeter is basically the distance around an object. Perimeter is basically the distance around an object, right? So how do we actually put in the formula over here? P is equal to 4 times whatever the side is. And then the second part is the area of the square. How do we calculate area? It's actually side times side. So whatever, notice I'm using side there. I'm using side there. I'm using side there. So it's just one value. So let's go and look at this now, right? Take all that out. Just give me a moment, guys. Okay, right. So I'm just going to go and put the import math statement over here. Right. First things first, we need a side. We need a variable. Now, obviously, we want it to be meaningful, so we'll call it side. I'm just going to say side is assigned 20. So all for each side of the square is 20. What do I have to find? What do I have to find? The first thing I have to find is the perimeter. And the perimeter is 4 times the side, giving you the formula there. So remember, I told you that your variable names need to be meaningful. So perimeter will equal to, very simple, 4, symbol for multiplication is asterisk, and it's going to be side. And then I need to work out area. How do I work out area? area is basically side times side, or it's actually the square, isn't that so? Right? So you can do this in two ways, but I'm just going to go area is assigned side times side. And then we have our two things. We have our perimeter and we have our side. Now, this is the important thing. Before we move on to other things, I want you to understand something, that when your program gives feedback to the user, it, like I said yesterday, it must be user-friendly. For example, remember I told you we were looking at it cannot concatenate string and float. Remember that? Right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and say MSG. I could just come over here and say print uh, perimeter and print area. So that should work. So look at it, guys. If 20 is the side, 4 times 20 is 80. 80 is our perimeter. And area will be 20 times 20, which is 400. So we're looking at 80 and 400 being our output. Remember, whenever you write a program, it's always a good idea for you to know what the output should be, what the expected output should be. Because if you don't get the output, then you know there's something wrong. And there we go, we got 80 and 400. But it does not look very user-friendly. I mean, if a user just sees 80 and 400, okay, what the hell does 80 and 400 mean? We have no idea what it refers to. Remember I said yesterday, we need user-friendly messages. Now, yesterday, I showed you the str. Remember that? So let's do that. We're going to have MSG1. Message 1 is assigned. And we're going to come here and say the area of the square is colon space. And remember, I said plus. Now remember, perimeter is an integer, or it's an integer at the moment. We need, remember, it can only concatenate. The plus joins strings. Python can only join string to string. So we need to make perimeter a string. So we come over here and we'll say perimeter. Remember, this is from yesterday. This is called casting. So what are we doing? We are casting perimeter, whether it's float or int, into a string, right? And then I'm going to come here and say message 2 is assigned. Oh, all right, okay. And sorry, this is wrong. This is perimeter. And then this would be the area of the square is, and once again, plus str, and that would be area. So in our two print statements over here, I have two messages to display. I have message, oh, sorry about that. I have message 1 and I have message 2. Now I'll tell you something. Different teachers teach in different ways, different programmers program in different ways. But I've always said that, you know what, instead of putting all of this over here inside a print statement, it's always a good idea to create your output and store it in a variable and then just display that variable, because it makes it a hell of a lot easier and it's a lot more straightforward. There you go. Now that is a lot more meaningful than the 80 and 400 we had seen. So the perimeter of the square is 80, and the I couldn't spell square there, and the area of the square is 400. Right. Now, here's the thing. Remember yesterday we spoke about comments as well. So I could come over here and we're going to say calc perimeter. Remember it's hash and double space, calc area, right? Display perimeter and display area. Okay, so Now, if you look at this over here, it makes a lot more sense. Now we come to the most interesting thing. Now, now in this instant, guys, the side is 20. What if the side was 15? So that basically means now if I want to work out the perimeter and area of the square for a side of 15, I need to come into the program and change it to 15. So that should be what? 60 and 225. Perimeter is 60 and area is 225. Can you see that? So each time I have a square with a different length, I need to come into the program and change it myself, right? Which is not a very good way of actually doing it, because imagine a person that's using the computer and they don't know programming, they don't know Python like you know. So how would they go and work it out for different things? Remember, whenever we write a program, it must be a general program. That means it must not only work for a square of length of side 20, it must work for any square at all, right? So right now, it's only working each time we have to go physically change it. Now, if we come here and we say, if I change this question to input the side of a square. Input, basically it's from the keyboard. You want the user to input it, etc., right? You want the user to input it. Okay, so how do we go about doing that? And that brings us to the next part of our lesson, which is user input. Now, I didn't get a chance to actually put this in the slide, but basically, here, if all of you can see that. We have user input. Now we can get input from the user by using the input. And inside my argument would be a message, whatever I'm telling the user method. So we have the input method. Now the input method gets input from the keyboard. And it only captures that input once you, whatever the user types, once they press enter, then only it captures, it gets the data. If you don't press enter, it's not going to get it, right? So the input method, this input method gets all keyboard input as strings. Every single thing it gets is as string. So if you look at this over here, we did the type statement yesterday, remember that? If I say X is assigned input, enter a number. And if I say a print the type of X is going to give you class string, every single thing that you input as an integer, I'm sorry, as a using the input method, the input method is a string. Now, if I need to calculate, if I need to carry out mathematical operations on this, I need to take that string and cast it into an integer. Remember that? Check here. We are casting a number into string. Now, right? Now, I want to change this. So I'm going to come over here and say input. And in single quotes, I'm going to say over here, enter the side of the square. So what's going to happen is when Python sees this input, it actually stops running. It waits for the user now. Only when Python senses that the enter key has been pressed, then it will move on. Now, right now, it's going to give me a whole bunch of errors. Why? Because remember, input only gets string. So right now, remember I told you yesterday, when you assign a value to a variable, Python automatically gives it a data type. Now, input only gets string, so automatically side is of type string. I hope all of you are following that. And I'm running this deliberately for you, right? Check it out. If I go and enter, uh, say 15, remember it was 60 and 225, right? And there we go. Now let's look at this error. We got traceback, recent call outs. Don't worry about that. This is basically telling us where the file is actually saved. And it's actually telling us in which line the error actually occurred, right? Let's go and look at it. In which line? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, it's telling us line 7, right? in the module. Area. Right, okay, it's giving us the error over there. Can't multiply sequence by non-int. That basically means it cannot multiply strings. Can you see that? So what is our solution? Here, I input the side of this square. But remember, Python took it in as a string. So before I move on, sorry, before I move on, let us go and how do I make the string into an integer now? Let's go and cast it. Cast side. Now remember the very first lesson that I did? I told you that you can replace the value. And when you replace the value, what Python does is it will actually change the data type. Now remember, all of you pay careful attention. In this line over here, right? User is inputting the this layer as a string. As a string. It's just smaller. Okay. As a string. So this is a string. So when Python hits this line and this line is executed, side is of type string. Now, when we come to this line, what's happening over here? Python is taking side, it's converting it into an integer, and it's going to store it into side, and then the data type of side actually changes. In this line, it is string. In this line, it's integer. So let's go and run this now. Now, if this is an integer at this point, right? So basically what happens here? Side now becomes type int. All right. So right, what shall we put in over there? Let's go and put a really weird number. There we go. The perimeter of the square is 108 and the area of the square is 729. The other thing that you should do, guys, is you can see how this actually works, but you can go and work it out in your calculator to see, hey, is this correct? All right. Now, what happened over here? Please pay careful attention. I need to, let's just do that there. The user, now, each time, now I can do this for any square, irrespective of the length, because each time it runs, excuse me, Python allows you to enter a different value. Each time it runs, Python allows it to run a different value. Look at it the second time. This is the first run, guys. 56. Now I'm going to put 98 and press enter, and it will work it out. And if I go and run it again, and you can see all the different outputs over here. Can you see that? If I go and put 125, can you see that? It will carry irrespective of the number, and you can run it as many times as you want and try it for different squares. So what is the thing that we actually learned today? Firstly, we looked at all of our functions, which we actually haven't used here right now yet. But if you look at this here, the input statement. The input statement, inside the input statement, within quotes, we will have a message. Now that message is making the program user-friendly. It's actually telling the user, hey, you know what? This is what we want you to do. Right? So when you give the user, this is called the program being user-friendly. So, sorry, excuse me. So if you look at this here now, right? That's how it works. It actually works very, very simply. We tell the user what to do. We get the data that the user is entering and it's stored inside. It's a string. Remember, input always, all input is string. We have to convert it or cast it into the data type that we require. So at this point over here, side is of type string. Over here, we convert side into an integer, we cast it into an integer, and it's the data type of slide changes. Where did we get this from? This was given in our question, guys. P is assigned 4 times side. Where did we get this one from? That's also in the question, guys. So remember, you need to analyze your question properly. And it said output. So that was determining this, right? Guys, see these 2 lines over here? These are the determining parts. Determine and output. Do you follow? So that's your determine and that's your output, right? And these are our 2 messages that we're going to be displaying. Right, so that's it. I'm just going to go and open up a new file. Right, you can just look at that in the meantime while I do this. Okay, so that's now, oh, the other thing, you see these editor screens, there's one program over here. See these editor screens, you can open up as many as you want, right? So let us go and look at the next question. Now, if you look at the next question, it's very similar to the first one. We did the square, now obviously this is the rectangle. So we have how many inputs? Now in no more, we're not going to say given now. We're going to say input. Input the length and the breadth, right? And we're going to be working out, there's a formula over here, 2 times the length plus 2 times the breadth, because there's 2 lengths and 2 breadths in a rectangle. And obviously area is length times breadth, right? So let's go and look at that in my new program. Once again, I'm just going to go import math out of habit. Firstly, I need to input the, right, let's go look at the question again, sorry. What do I need to input? I need to input the length and I need to input the breadth. So how many inputs do I have? Right? I have 2 inputs. Now I've got these 2 inputs, and if you look at my formulae, length I need from input, breadth I need from input, length and breadth I need from input. So I need those 2. And it says once again determine an output, and we need perimeter and area. So in this program, we had 1 input. In our new program, we're going to have 2 inputs. Oh, by the way, remember on day 1, I spoke about input, getting the data. There we go. Input, getting the data. Remember I said about processing, brain processing. There's the processing. And remember I said output, you're giving feedback. There's your feedback. Right? If you go back and look at the thing on YouTube, you will see that it's, well, actually, that's there, your input, your processing, and your output. So we have 1 input here. We're going to need 2 here. I need 2 values from the user. One is the length and one is the breadth. So I'm just going to call it length and breadth. Remember, meaningful variables is assigned input. And we're going to say enter the length of the rectangle. So the user is going to enter the length, and remember it will be a string. So at this point, length is of type string. I'm just going to come here. Okay. My next input is my breadth is assigned input, and we're going to say enter the breadth. No, sorry, just do it on top. Enter the breadth of the rectangle. Oh, let's just go and give a space, a colon, a space of this to make it right. And remember over here, breadth of type str as well. Okay, so we've got the user is going to enter the length, and it's going to be a string. The user is going to enter the breadth. It's also going to be a string, right? Uh, okay, I'm going to leave this, right? The white space is important, leaves blank lines so we can tell the difference. Now just remember, at the moment, length and breadth are of type string. We need to make it integer, and we do that by casting it as integers. So length is assigned int, that's your cast of length, right? So length of type int now, right? And breadth, oh, actually, let's just do this. This will be a hell of a lot better with regards to the comment I'm talking about, guys. Right? Instead of doing this here, let's just take that out from there and put it on top and say cast length and breadth as int. So this is what we're doing over here. So here, let's go and put a comment, because later on when you guys are watching the videos, you can see this is here is user inputs length and breadth. So remember, I told you your comments make the program a hell of a lot more useful. There we go. Right. Then this is our input. We only cast it. We did not calculate anything yet. So we need to work out perimeter. Now, remember on day one, I spoke about the order of operations and BODMAS rule, etc., etc. If you look at this over here, I've got a plus and I've got two multiplications, right? So I can do this over here to make it a little bit easier to understand. I'm going to come over here and say perimeter is assigned. I actually like typing like this here, so it makes it, I don't miss out any brackets. What's it? It's actually 2 times the length plus 2 times the breadth. So you'll notice now it's going to work out 2 times the length, it'll work out 2 times the breadth, and then it'll add the 2, right? So that makes it easy. So you can see 2 times length plus 2 times breadth. 2 times length plus 2 times breadth. I deliberately did not put brackets here because I wanted to put it in the program so you can see how that works. Now, if we look at our area of a rectangle, it's pretty straightforward, people. It's length times breadth. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to come here and say area is assigned length times breadth. So let's put a comment here. Okay. And then I'm just going to come over here and say create output messages. Remember what I did in the previous program? Stop the M here. Okay, so we calculated the perimeter, we calculated the area, right? Now I need to go and create my 2 messages. So I'm going to say MSG1 is assigned, and we're going to say perimeter of the rectangle is, and remember once again, perimeter is of int. We can only join strings, so we cast that into a string, right? And MSG2, message 2 is assigned, and we're going to go with area of rectangle is, and once again, we have to cast the area into string. And then obviously the last part, display perimeter and area. So that will be print MSG1 is our perimeter, and print MSG2. Right, guys. So all of you can see this. Let's go through this. We've got our import. Well, we never use it yet. And I've got comments. Now, if you look at the program, if all of you look at the program, you'll notice that those comments make the program very, very easy to understand the different parts. There are 5 parts. The first part is user input. Here, the user is inputting the length and the breadth as strings using the input method. In this part over here now, because I need to do mathematical calculations, I need to cast length and breadth to int. So I'm casting the two length and breadth into int, and obviously the data types are changing here. Then obviously this is the actual calculation. The formula was given, perimeter equals 2 times length plus 2 times breadth. Area is length times breadth. This part, other teachers will tell you, you know what, just go and display this here. This is extra work, but believe me, it makes it a lot easier. We are casting our perimeter into string, and I'm joining it to this string over here, casting the area into string and displaying it over, joining it over there, and then obviously I just display. So let's go and run it. And what length? Let's assume we say length. If the length is 10 and the length is 20 and the breadth is 10, 20, 40, 60 is the perimeter and 200 would be the area. So I'm saying 20 and 10. So what's it? 40, 60, and 200. Here we go. Perimeter of the rectangle is 60 and the area is 20, 40, 60, yeah, 200, right? Let's go and try it out now. Because the user is inputting it, right? Because the user is inputting it, we can go and try different things now. We can go and try, you know what, let's just try 56 and 13. And irrespective of what values you actually put in, guys, irrespective of what values you put in, right? It will always, always work. Right, let me give you the my email address, and I'll just type it up here, right? And it's basically all lowercase, guys. .co.za. Right? So that is my email address. If any of you feel that you have any queries, etc., please let me know. And obviously we can work from there. Hopefully you guys have actually learned something today.